No one noticed anything wrong at first. The small courthouse clock in the town square had just chimed 10 when a dark sedan rolled past the empty diner on Maple Crossing Road. The driver slowed briefly at the intersection, signaled, then disappeared down a narrow stretch of highway that cut between fields and trees. It was the same route locals took every night without thinking. The same road couples used to drive home after late dinners. The same road that, on paper, had never taken a life. Inside the car were two newlyweds, both just out of their teens, still adjusting to the strange weight of being called husband and wife. They had married quietly weeks earlier, skipping any real celebration. No honeymoon. No long trip. Just a promise to build something better than what either of them had grown up with. That was the last confirmed sighting of them alive. The following morning, the absence was subtle. A missed shift at a hardware store. A phone that rang without answer. A landlord who knocked on an apartment door that stayed closed. By noon, concern had replaced inconvenience. By evening, fear had settled in. Their names were added to a list that would remain unchanged for 2 decades. The town they vanished from sat near the edge of 2 state lines, close enough that people crossed borders daily without realizing it. Rolling land, long roads, and pockets of forest where sound seemed to disappear. It was the kind of place where everyone recognized your face but didn't always know your story. The newlyweds had been living there less than 6 months. They were young, by most standards. Both 19. Still learning how to share space. Still arguing over music on the radio. Friends later said they talked often about leaving town someday, but not yet. Not without money. Not without a plan. On the night they disappeared, they had visited a small gathering at a friend's place just outside town limits. Nothing wild. No drugs. No fight. Just conversation, laughter, and the nervous excitement of 2 people still new to marriage. Witnesses would later say they left around 10 o'clock, intending to head straight home. They never arrived. When police were finally notified, the initial response felt routine. Officers drove the roads they were known to use. Checked parking lots. Asked friends if the couple had mentioned plans to travel. The assumption was simple. Young people run off. Couples fight. Phones get turned off. But the car was missing too. That detail complicated things. It was a dark 4-door sedan, recently purchased, and still being paid off. No sightings. No abandoned vehicle. No toll records. No credit card use. It was as if both the couple and the car had been erased somewhere between one intersection and the next. By the 3rd day, rumors began to spread. Some claimed the husband owed money. Others whispered about jealousy and betrayal. A few insisted they had been seen heading south toward another state, chasing a fresh start without telling anyone. None of it could be proven. None of it could be dismissed either. The investigation stalled almost as quickly as it began. Local law enforcement lacked resources. There was no immediate evidence of a crime scene. No blood. No witnesses to violence. No broken guardrails. Search teams walked stretches of highway and wooded areas but found nothing that clearly belonged to the couple. The case files grew thin. Weeks turned into months. Months into years. Their families were left with questions no one could answer. Birthdays passed without phone calls. Holidays arrived without cards. The husband's mother kept his room exactly the same, refusing to believe he wouldn't walk back through the door. The wife's father checked riverbanks every spring when the water levels dropped, convinced he would see something others had missed. But nothing surfaced. As time went on, interest faded. New cases replaced old ones. The newlyweds became a footnote in town history, mentioned occasionally in late-night conversations or online forums dedicated to unsolved disappearances. Then came the theories. Some believed the couple had been targeted, that someone they trusted had followed them that night. The lack of evidence became proof to believers that something sinister had occurred. Others leaned toward accident, but without a vehicle, even that explanation felt incomplete. One detail haunted investigators more than any other. The road they had taken home ran parallel to a river. Not a wide river. Not dramatic. Just a slow, murky stretch of water that locals rarely thought about. It didn't have warning signs. No guardrails along certain curves. At night, the surface reflected the darkness so completely that it looked like empty space. Yet early searches had focused almost entirely on land. Years passed. Technology changed. The case sat untouched in a filing cabinet until a chance encounter brought it back into focus. A volunteer searcher from another state, known online for documenting recoveries of submerged vehicles, stumbled across the couple's names while researching old cold cases. What caught his attention wasn't the rumors or theories. It was the missing car. To him, that detail screamed possibility rather than mystery. He began mapping the roads himself, using satellite images and historical data. Old photographs. Changes in water levels. Subtle bends in the highway that had been altered since the year 2000. He noticed something that no official search had documented properly before. A sharp curve near the river where the road dipped slightly and the shoulder narrowed. No crash reports. No barriers. No signs of disturbance. Just water. When he reached out to local authorities, the response was hesitant. The case was old. Resources were limited. But curiosity had been reignited, and permission was eventually granted for a brief exploratory search. 2 decades after the Newlyweds vanished, a camera would finally enter the river. And what it would capture would force everyone to confront a truth hidden in plain sight. But no one was prepared for what the footage would actually show. The river didn't look dangerous. From the bank, it barely moved, sliding past in a slow, deliberate current that reflected the gray of the sky above. Tall grass leaned toward the water's edge, and fallen branches rested half-submerged like forgotten debris. It was the kind of place people passed every day without a second thought. But beneath the surface, visibility dropped to almost nothing. When the YouTuber arrived, he didn't bring a large crew. No news vans. No dramatic announcement. Just a truck, a small inflatable boat, sonar equipment, and a camera designed to see what human eyes couldn't. Local authorities watched cautiously from the shore. For years, the prevailing belief had been that if the Newlyweds' car had gone into the river, someone would have noticed. A splash. Tire marks. Something. But the road had been resurfaced twice since their disappearance. The water level had risen and fallen countless times. Whatever traces once existed were long gone. The YouTuber launched the sonar slowly, methodically tracing lines across the riverbed. The screen flickered with shadows and shapes, logs, rocks, debris left behind by storms decades earlier. Each pass eliminated more uncertainty, but also heightened the tension. Then something appeared that didn't belong. A long, rectangular shape sat at an unnatural angle, partially buried in silt. The outline was faint but unmistakable. Too symmetrical to be debris. Too large to ignore. The operator froze the image. The dimensions matched a sedan. Authorities moved closer to the monitor, silence settling over the riverbank. No one spoke at first. The years of speculation, blame, and unanswered questions suddenly narrowed into a single point beneath the water. A camera was lowered next. As it descended, the water darkened, swallowing light. the screen filled with drifting particles, each movement magnified by the current. Then metal emerged from the gloom, first a corner, then a door, then the unmistakable curve of a roof. The car rested upside down. It was intact. Mud coated the windows, but the frame remained solid, preserved by the cold, slow-moving water. The license plate was obscured, but the body style matched the missing vehicle. The river had held its secret for 20 years. Recovery efforts began carefully. The vehicle was secured, slowly lifted, and brought toward the surface. As it broke through the waterline, the smell of decay mixed with river silt filled the air. Officials turned away instinctively. Cameras were shut off. This part was no longer content. It was evidence. Inside the car, investigators found what they had both hoped for and dreaded. The remains of 2 individuals were still seated in the front. Seatbelts fastened. Personal items scattered but largely undisturbed. A wallet. A ring. A small charm hanging from the rearview mirror. There was no sign of a struggle. No bullet holes. No blunt force trauma visible at first glance. The official conclusion formed quickly. The Newlyweds had lost control on a dark stretch of road, slipped silently into the river, and drowned before anyone realized what had happened. For many, that explanation brought relief. For others, it raised more questions than it answered. The road itself became the focus. Investigators retraced the couple's final route, this time with modern tools. They noted the lack of guardrails near the curve. The way the pavement dipped slightly toward the water. How headlights at night reflected off the river's surface, creating the illusion of open road ahead. It was possible. Tragically possible. Yet something didn't sit right. The car showed minimal exterior damage for a vehicle that had supposedly veered off its speed. The angle at which it rested suggested a controlled descent rather than a violent crash. And perhaps most troubling of all, there were faint markings on the driver's side door that didn't match impact with water or rocks. They looked like scrapes. Horizontal. As if the vehicle had brushed against something solid before entering the river. The markings were subtle, easily overlooked, but once seen, impossible to ignore. Then there was the timeline. Phone records revealed a brief signal ping minutes after the couple supposedly left the gathering. It placed them not on the main highway, but near a service road that ran parallel to it, an area that had never been thoroughly searched. Why would they be there? Friends insisted the couple had no reason to take that route. It added time, not saved it. And yet the data didn't lie. Speculation returned with force. Some theorized they had been followed. Others suggested they stopped for someone they trusted. A stranger needing help. A vehicle pulled over. A moment of hesitation that changed everything. The idea of simple accident began to fracture. Authorities faced a difficult choice. Reopen a case that had already been quietly closed, or risk ignoring details that could point to something more deliberate. The official stance remained cautious. No evidence of foul play, but unanswered questions warranted review. Meanwhile, the YouTuber released his footage. Millions watched. Comments flooded in from viewers across the world, analyzing frames, slowing clips, enhancing images. Amateur investigators spotted details professionals had missed, or claimed to. The case, once forgotten, was suddenly alive again. And with attention came pressure. A retired officer stepped forward, admitting that early searches had avoided the river due to budget constraints and assumptions about visibility. Another local revealed that on the night of the disappearance, a call had come in reporting a stalled vehicle near the curve, but the report had never been followed up. No record of who made the call. No dispatch log. Just a memory. As the families absorbed the findings, closure felt strangely distant. Yes, the couple had been found. Yes, their remains were returned. But the story still felt incomplete. They hadn't simply vanished. Something had happened out there in the dark. And the river, for all it had revealed, might still be hiding the most important truth of all. Because as investigators reviewed the recovered vehicle more closely, they discovered something lodged deep beneath the driver's seat, something that didn't belong to either newlywed. And it would change the direction of the case once again. The object beneath the driver's seat was small, but it carried weight far beyond its size. Investigators didn't notice it immediately. It was lodged deep into the carpet padding, pressed into the metal floor as if forced there by impact or movement. At first glance, it looked like a piece of broken plastic. But once removed and cleaned, its shape became clear. It was part of a key fob. Not from the newlyweds' car. The vehicle they had been driving used a different ignition system. Older, simpler. This fragment belonged to a newer model, one that wouldn't exist on the market until years after their disappearance. That fact alone should have been impossible. And yet, there it was. The discovery reignited everything. If the car had entered the river the same night the couple vanished, how did an object manufactured later end up inside it? Some argued contamination during recovery, but chain of custody logs showed the interior had remained sealed until forensic processing began. Others suggested the river had carried debris inside over time. But that theory collapsed quickly. The windows were fully closed. The seals, though degraded, showed no signs of being breached from the outside. Whatever entered that car had done so before it went into the water, or while someone was still inside. For the first time, officials publicly acknowledged the possibility of third-party involvement. The service road resurfaced in discussions. Investigators returned to it, this time interviewing residents who had lived nearby in 2000. One man, now elderly, recalled seeing headlights stopped along that road late one night around the time of the disappearance. He assumed it was a breakdown. Another remembered hearing raised voices but never called it in. Memories faded. Details blurred. But patterns began to form. The phone ping near the service road could no longer be ignored. Nor could the scrape marks on the car's side, which now matched the height and material of a metal barrier that had since been removed from that same area. The emerging theory was no longer simple accident. It suggested an encounter. Perhaps the newlyweds had stopped for someone. Perhaps they were forced to stop. What happened next remained unclear, but the evidence hinted at a brief confrontation, one that ended with their vehicle being deliberately moved toward the river. The angle of descent suddenly made sense. So did the intact condition of the car. It hadn't crashed. It had been placed. The idea was terrifying, but also frustratingly incomplete. No DNA recovered from the key fob fragment could be matched. No fingerprints survived. No witnesses could provide a name, a face, or even a clear description. The YouTuber, now deeply entwined in the case, was careful in his follow-up videos. He emphasized facts over speculation, but viewers drew their own conclusions. Online forums exploded with theories ranging from accidental cover-up to intentional homicide. Some believed someone panicked and made a terrible decision. Others believed the couple had stumbled upon something they weren't meant to see. Authorities officially reclassified the case as undetermined, a rare move that acknowledged uncertainty without assigning blame. It satisfied no one. For the families, grief took on a new shape. They finally had remains to bury, graves to visit, names to engrave in stone. But closure remained elusive. Answers had come wrapped in more questions than before. The husband's mother later said that knowing he hadn't abandoned them brought peace, but knowing he might have been frightened in his final moments took it away again. The wife's father stopped visiting the river after the recovery. He said it felt different now, like it had done its job and was finished with him. The key fob fragment was eventually archived. The service road was repaved. Life moved on. But the case didn't disappear again. Every anniversary brought renewed attention. Each time the YouTuber mentioned it, tips trickled in, none strong enough to reopen a full criminal investigation, but enough to keep the mystery alive. And that may be the most unsettling part. The Newlyweds didn't vanish into thin air. They didn't run away. They didn't simply fade into history. They were there the whole time, hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for technology and curiosity to finally catch up. What truly happened on that dark road remains unknown. Whether it was a tragic chain of coincidences or a deliberate act carried out by someone who has never been identified, the truth rests somewhere between the riverbed and memory. And perhaps it always will. Because sometimes, even when the unimaginable is revealed, the most important answers stay just out of reach. Silent, unseen, and buried where no camera can fully illuminate them. Was this truly a tragic accident hiding in plain sight? Or did someone play a role that night and walk away unnoticed for decades? Drop your theory in the comments on what you think really happened on that day. And if stories like this matter to you, please support the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Your support helps keep these forgotten cases alive, and sometimes it helps bring answers closer than anyone expects.